My name is Lauren Hayes. I'm 32 years old, and the morning my mother called to tell me she and my father were moving into my Lakehouse the next day, I was standing in the kitchen I'd just finished painting, holding a coffee mug I'd bought specifically because nobody else had ever touched it, staring at my phone like it had just delivered news of a natural disaster. "We're coming up tomorrow," she said. "Your dad already packed the car. We'll take the guest room for now, but we're thinking long term. You've got the space." I didn't say anything at first. She continued, "If you don't like it, you can find somewhere else. This house is way too big for one person anyway." I set down the mug very carefully. "Mom," I said slowly, "this is my house. I bought it 3 weeks ago. And we're your parents," she said. "Family shares." Then she hung up. I stood there in the silence of a house I'd chosen specifically because it was 200 miles away from everyone who'd ever made me feel like I owed them something, and I realized that even here, even now, they thought they could just walk in and take it. They were wrong. But before I tell you what I did in the 18 hours between that phone call and their arrival, and why my father's face went pale when I opened the door holding a stack of folders, tell me this. Have you ever worked your whole life to build something that felt like yours, only to have someone you're supposed to love act like it belonged to them all along? 3 months earlier, I was sitting in a conference room in downtown Chicago during a compliance review that had stretched into its 7th hour, listening to executives argue over risk assessments I'd written, when something inside me just quietly snapped. Not dramatically, not loudly, just a small internal click that said, "You don't have to do this anymore." I'd been a compliance analyst for 9 years. I was good at it. I made decent money. I had a title that sounded impressive at family gatherings. But I was also exhausted in a way that sleep couldn't fix. And I'd started to realize that the only reason I stayed was because leaving felt like admitting I'd wasted a decade. So I quit. Not impulsively. I had savings. I had a plan. I'd been looking at properties upstate for months. Places far enough from the city that I could actually hear myself think. I found the Lakehouse online. It was small, older, needed work, but it sat on 3 acres of quiet, with water I could see from the bedroom window. The listing had been up for 2 weeks. I made an offer that afternoon. My parents didn't know I was quitting until after I'd already signed the paperwork. I told them over the phone because I didn't want to see their faces when I said it. My mother's response was immediate. "You quit? Without another job lined up?" "I'm taking some time off," I said. "That's not how the real world works, Lauren. I'm aware." My father got on the line. "Where are you going to live?" "I bought a house." Silence. Then my mother said, "You bought a house? With what money?" "My money," I said. She laughed like I'd told a joke. "We'll talk about this later." They didn't talk about it later. They just filed it away as another thing I'd done that didn't make sense to them, and I moved 200 miles north into a house with creaky floors and a view that made me feel like I could finally breathe. For 3 weeks, I didn't hear from them. I painted. I unpacked. I sat on the back deck with my coffee every morning and watched the water and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Then my mother called. The first red flag should have been how casual she sounded, like she was calling to confirm dinner plans, not announce a permanent invasion. "Your dad and I have been talking," she said. "We think it makes sense for us to move up there with you for a while. Maybe longer. You've got the space, and honestly, we're tired of the city." I frowned. "You live in the suburbs, Mom. You're not in the city." "Same thing," she said. "The point is, we want to change. And you're up there all alone in that big house. It'll be good for all of us." I felt my chest tighten. "I didn't buy this house so we could all live together." "Well, you didn't buy it to be selfish either," she said, her tone sharpening. "We're your parents, Lauren. You don't just shut us out because you're going through some phase. This isn't a phase. Then it won't be a problem." I tried a different approach. "Mom, I need space right now. I just left my job. I'm trying to figure things out. And we're trying to support you," she said. "That's what family does." The conversation went in circles for another 10 minutes before she said she had to go and hung up without waiting for me to agree to anything. I sat on my couch afterward, staring at the wall, trying to figure out if I'd just been asked or told. The next morning, my father called. "Your mother told me you're being difficult about us visiting. I'm not being difficult, I said. I just don't think now is a good time. We're not asking, Lauren. That sentence hung in the air like a threat. I took a breath. Dad, this is my house, and we're your family, he said. You don't turn away family. I wanted to argue. I wanted to explain that boundaries weren't the same as rejection. But I'd had versions of this conversation with them my whole life, and I'd never won once. So instead I said, I'll think about it. He seemed satisfied with that. Good. We'll see you soon. He hung up. I sat there holding my phone, and for the first time since I'd moved, the house didn't feel peaceful. It felt like a target. That afternoon, I did something I hadn't done in years. I started going through my old financial records. Not because I was suspicious, not yet, but because I wanted to understand exactly how much I'd given my parents over the years. How many times I'd helped with rent, with car repairs, with emergency expenses that always seemed to come up right when I got a raise. I pulled up my banking app and started scrolling. Rent assistance, February 2019, $800, car repair, June 2020, $1,200, medical emergency, October 2021, $3,000. I kept scrolling. The numbers added up faster than I expected. By the time I reached 2018, I was already at over $30,000. I sat back, staring at the screen. $30,000 in 4 years. And I couldn't remember a single time they'd paid me back. I opened my laptop and started building a spreadsheet. Every transaction, every Venmo, every check I'd written, I included dates, amounts, and the reasons they'd given me. It took 3 hours. When I finished, the total was $62,000. I stared at the number, my stomach turning. $62,000 over 9 years. And they were about to show up at my door expecting me to let them live here for free. That night, I called my best friend Jenna. She was the only person I trusted to tell me the truth without sugarcoating it. I told her about the call, about the money, about the spreadsheet. She was quiet for a long moment, then she said, Lauren, you know what this is, right? I didn't answer. They've been using you, she said, and now they want to move in because they think they can keep doing it. I know, I said quietly. So what are you going to do? I don't know yet. She sighed. If it were me, I'd tell them no. But I know it's harder when it's your parents. She was right. It was harder. Because no matter how much money I'd given them, no matter how many times they dismissed my boundaries, they were still my parents, and some part of me still wanted them to see me as more than a resource. But wanting something doesn't make it real. I spent the next 2 days digging deeper. I didn't just look at what I'd given them. I looked at what they'd told me they needed the money for. The medical emergency in 2021? I found a Facebook post from my mother the same week showing photos from a resort in Florida. The car repair in 2020? My father had posted a picture of a brand new golf club set 2 days after I sent the money. The emergency rent assistance in 2019? They'd been late because they'd booked a cruise. Every single time the story had been a lie, or at least a version of the truth edited to make me feel like I had to help. I printed everything: bank statements, Venmo screenshots, Facebook posts, text messages where they'd asked for money and promised to pay me back. I put it all in a folder. Then I sat at my kitchen table and stared at it, trying to decide what to do. The next morning, my mother called again. We're coming up tomorrow, she said. Your dad already packed the car. We'll take the guest room for now, but we're thinking long term. You've got the space. I didn't say anything at first. She continued. If you don't like it, you can find somewhere else. This house is way too big for one person anyway. I set down my coffee mug very carefully. Mom, I said slowly, this is my house. I bought it 3 weeks ago. And we're your parents, she said. Family shares. Then she hung up. I sat there for a long time after that call, my hands resting on the folder in front of me. Then I opened my laptop and started typing. I didn't write an email. I wrote a report, the kind I used to write for compliance audits. Clean, detailed, impossible to argue with. I listed every dollar I'd sent them. I included screenshots. I noted discrepancies between what they'd told me and what they'd actually done with the money. I added a section titled Pattern of Financial Dependency. Then I wrote a second document, a formal rental agreement, market rate for the area, first month, last month, and security deposit required. Utilities split evenly, 60 days notice to vacate. I printed both documents and put them in separate folders. Then I sat back and waited. They were coming tomorrow, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't going to just let them take what they wanted. The next morning, I woke up at 6, not because I was anxious, but because I wanted to be ready. I made coffee, showered, and spent 20 minutes going over the documents I'd printed the night before, every number, every date, every receipt. By the time I heard tires on the gravel driveway around 10, I was sitting at the kitchen table with 3 folders stacked in front of me like evidence at a trial. I didn't move when I heard the car doors slam. I didn't rush to the window. I just sat there, listening to my mother's voice drift through the glass as she told my father where to unload the bags. They didn't knock. The front door opened, and my mother walked in carrying a duffel bag like she owned the place. "Oh, good, you're up," she said, glancing around. "This place is cute. Needs some updating, but it's got potential." My father followed her in with 2 suitcases and a garment bag. "Where do you want these?" he asked, not to me, but to my mother. "Guest room is upstairs," she said. "Second door on the left, I'm guessing." I stood up slowly. "Actually," I said, "we need to talk first." My mother set down her bag and looked at me like I'd just interrupted something important. "Lauren, we drove 2 hours. Can we at least settle in before you start whatever this is?" "No," I said. "We're doing this now." My father sighed and set the suitcases down. "What's the problem?" I gestured to the table. "Sit." They exchanged a look, the kind of look parents give each other when they think their kid is being dramatic. But they sat. I stayed standing. I picked up the first folder and opened it. "This is a financial summary," I said. "It covers every dollar I've sent you over the past 9 years. Rent assistance, car repairs, medical emergencies, all of it." My mother frowned. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the $62,000 I've given you since 2016. Her face went blank. My father leaned back in his chair. "We didn't ask you to keep track. You didn't have to," I said. "I kept track because I'm good at my job." Or I was. I slid the folder across the table. My mother opened it, glanced at the first page, then closed it. "This is ridiculous," she said. "You're making it sound like we're criminals. I'm making it sound like you've been taking money from me for years and never paying it back." "We're your parents," she snapped. "You don't charge family interest." "I'm not talking about interest," I said. "I'm talking about the fact that you told me you needed $3,000 for a medical emergency in 2021, and then I saw pictures of you in Florida the same week." Silence. My father's jaw tightened. "We went to Florida after the emergency," he said. "No," I said. "You went during." "I have the dates." I pulled out my phone and showed them the Facebook post. My mother in a sundress by a pool, my father holding a drink with an umbrella in it. Posted October 14th, 2021, the same day I'd wired them the money. My mother looked at the screen, then at me. "So what?" she said. "We needed a break. We were stressed. You told me it was for medical bills." "It was," she said, her voice rising. "We used some of it for that. The rest we used to decompress. You have no idea what we were going through." I stared at her. "You lied to me." "We didn't lie," my father said. "We just didn't give you every detail. That's the definition of lying." He stood up. "You know what, Lauren? This is exactly why we were worried about you quitting your job. You're being paranoid. You're turning normal family help into some kind of conspiracy." I didn't move. "Sit down," I said. He didn't. I picked up the second folder and opened it. "This one's more recent," I said. "About 3 months ago, you applied for a home equity loan, $47,500. The application listed me as a co-borrower." My mother's face went pale. "I didn't co-sign anything," I continued. "But somehow my name, my social security number, and my signature ended up on the paperwork." My father sat back down. I pulled out a copy of the loan application and set it on the table. My signature was at the bottom, except it wasn't my signature. It was close, but the loops were wrong. The spacing was off. I had it analyzed, I said, by someone who works in fraud prevention. They confirmed it's a forgery. My mother's hand went to her mouth. My father stared at the paper like it might catch fire. I don't know who signed this, I said quietly, but I know it wasn't me. I was in Seattle that week working on a project. I have emails, flight records, hotel receipts. Nobody said anything. So here's what's going to happen, I said. You're going to tell me the truth, right now, or I'm going to take this to a lawyer and let them figure it out. My mother started crying, not real crying, the kind of crying she did when she wanted sympathy. Soft, performative. We didn't mean for it to go this far, she said. Go where? I asked. She looked at my father. He rubbed his face. We needed the money, he said finally. The market was bad. We'd already borrowed against the house once. The bank wouldn't give us another loan unless we had a co-signer with better credit. So you forged my signature. We were going to tell you, my mother said quickly. We just needed to get approved first. Then we were going to explain everything and ask you to make it official. I stared at her. You committed fraud. We were desperate, she said. That doesn't make it legal. My father stood up again, this time angrier. You want to turn us in? Go ahead. See how that looks. See how the family reacts when you send your own parents to jail over money. I didn't flinch. I'm not sending you to jail, I said. I'm just not letting you move in. He blinked. What? I picked up the third folder. This is a rental agreement, I said. If you want to stay here, you'll pay $3,200 a month. That's market rate for this area. First month, last month, and security deposit due up front. Utilities split evenly. 60 days notice to vacate. Standard lease terms. I slid it across the table. My mother stared at it like I'd just handed her a bill for her own funeral. You want us to pay rent? She said. Yes. We're your parents, and this is my house. My father laughed. It was a bitter, sharp sound. You're really going to charge us? I'm really going to charge you, I said. Or you can leave. He looked at my mother. She looked at the folder. Then she looked at me. This is because you're angry, she said. You're trying to punish us. No, I said. I'm trying to set a boundary. Something I should have done years ago. My father picked up the rental agreement and skimmed it. This is insane, he muttered. It's fair, I said. He threw it back on the table. We're not signing this, then you're not staying. Silence. My mother stood up, her face red. You know what? Fine. We'll leave. But don't expect us to just forget this, Lauren. Don't expect us to keep pretending you're some kind of saint when you're treating us like strangers. I'm treating you like adults, I said. That's the problem. You're not used to it. She grabbed her bag and stormed toward the door. My father followed, but he stopped in the doorway and turned back. You're making a mistake, he said. Maybe, I said, but it's mine to make. They left. I stood at the window and watched them load the car. My mother was crying again, louder this time, talking to my father in a voice I couldn't quite hear. He kept shaking his head. Then they got in the car and drove away. I sat back down at the table and stared at the folders. My hands were shaking now, not from anger, from relief. I called Jenna. She answered on the second ring. How'd it go? They left, I said. Good. I showed them everything. The money, the loan, the rental agreement, and they didn't deny it. They just got mad that I wouldn't let them get away with it anymore. She was quiet for a second. Then she said, I'm proud of you. I didn't feel proud. I felt exhausted, but I also felt lighter. That afternoon, I went for a walk along the lake. The water was calm. The air smelled like pine and wet earth. I sat on a bench near the shore and just breathed. For the first time in my life, I'd said no, and I'd meant it. My phone buzzed. A text from my mother. We're staying with your aunt for a few days. I hope you're happy. I didn't reply. An hour later, my father texted, You owe us an apology. I blocked the number. Then I went home, made dinner, and sat on my back deck, watching the sun set over the water. The house was quiet, but this time the quiet felt like mine. I didn't know what would happen next. I didn't know if they'd try to come back. I didn't know if the rest of the family would take their side. But I knew one thing. I wasn't giving up this house. Not for them. Not for anyone. because for the first time in 32 years, I had something that was completely, undeniably, legally mine, and I was done apologizing for protecting it. The first few days after my parents left were strange. Not hard, just strange. I kept expecting them to call, to show up again, to try one more angle. But they didn't. The only contact I got was a single email from my mother 3 days later with the subject line, "Families shouldn't treat each other this way." I deleted it without reading past the preview. Jenna called that weekend. "How are you holding up?" she asked. "I'm okay," I said. "It's quiet." "Good quiet or bad quiet?" I thought about it. "Good," I said. "Definitely good." She laughed. "You sound surprised." "I am," I admitted. "I thought I'd feel guilty by now." "Do you?" "No." "Then you made the right call. We talked for another hour." She told me about work, about a guy she'd been seeing, about her plans to visit me once I was settled. I told her about the lake, about the house, about how I'd finally hung curtains in the living room, and it actually felt like a space I wanted to be in. When we hung up, I sat on my couch and realized something. I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop anymore. I was just living. A week later, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. It was my aunt, my mother's older sister, Carol. "Lauren," she said, her voice careful. "I heard what happened. I'm sure you did. Your mother's pretty upset." "I figured." She paused. "I'm not calling to take sides. I just want to understand what's going on." I took a breath and told her. Not everything, but enough. The money, the loan, the fact that they'd shown up expecting to move in without asking. Carol was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I didn't know about the loan. Neither did I said. "Until I found the paperwork." She sighed. "Your mother told me you were being difficult, that you'd kick them out over nothing. That's not what happened." "I know," she said. "I know because this isn't the first time." I frowned. "What do you mean?" She hesitated. "Your parents, they've always been like this, with money, with boundaries. When we were younger, your mom used to borrow from me all the time and then act like I was being selfish if I asked for it back. I stopped lending her money 20 years ago. Why didn't you ever tell me? Because I thought maybe with you it was different," she said. But I guess it wasn't. We talked for another 20 minutes. She told me stories I'd never heard, about how my mother had always treated family resources like they were communal, about how my father had a habit of making financial decisions without consulting anyone and then acting surprised when people were upset. By the time we hung up, I felt something I hadn't expected. Validation. Not from my parents, but from someone who'd known them longer than I had. 2 weeks after they left, I got a letter in the mail. Not an email. An actual letter, handwritten, from my father. It was short. "Lauren, we've been thinking about everything that happened. We still don't agree with how you handled it, but we understand you need space. We're willing to move forward if you are. We won't ask to move in again. But we would like to visit sometime. Let us know when you're ready. Dad." I read it twice. Then I folded it and put it in a drawer. I wasn't ready. I didn't know if I ever would be. That night, I sat down and wrote my own letter. Not to them, to myself. I wrote about the house, about why I'd bought it, about what it meant to have a place that was mine, and only mine. I wrote about the money, about how hard I'd worked for it, about how much I'd given away because I thought that's what love required. I wrote about boundaries, about how I'd spent 32 years believing that saying no made me selfish, when really it just made me honest. When I finished, I folded the letter and put it in the same drawer as my father's. Maybe someday I'd need to read it again. Maybe someday I'd forget why I'd drawn the line. But not today. A month later, Jenna came to visit. She drove up on a Friday afternoon with a suitcase, a bottle of wine, and a grin that said she was ready to see what I'd been talking about. I gave her the tour. The kitchen with the new paint, the living room with the curtains, the back deck with the view of the lake. She stood there for a long time, just looking. "This is perfect," she said. "It's getting there." "No," she said, turning to me. "It's perfect because it's yours. You don't have to share it. You don't have to justify it. You just get to enjoy it." I smiled. "Yeah, I do." We spent the weekend cooking, talking, walking along the lake. She didn't bring up my parents once, and I didn't either. On Sunday morning, we were sitting on the deck with coffee when she asked, "So, what's next?" "I don't know," I said. "I've been thinking about going back to work. Maybe freelance consulting, something I can do from here." "That sounds good. Or maybe I'll just take more time," I said. "I don't have to decide right now." "No," she said. "You don't." We sat in silence for a while. Then she said, "You know, I'm really proud of you." I looked at her. "For what?" "For not backing down," she said. "For not letting them guilt you into giving up something you worked for finally choosing yourself." I didn't know what to say to that, so I just said, "Thank you." After Jenna left, the house felt quiet again, but this time, the quiet didn't bother me. I started taking longer walks. I joined a yoga class in town. I met a few neighbors. I started freelancing for a couple of my old clients who needed compliance work done remotely. Slowly, the house stopped feeling like a retreat and started feeling like a life. 3 months after my parents left, I got another email from my mother. This one was longer. She said they'd been doing a lot of thinking, that they understood they'd overstepped, that they wanted to rebuild our relationship, but only if I was open to it. She didn't apologize for the money, she didn't apologize for the loan, but she did say she was sorry for not respecting my space. It wasn't enough, but it was something. I wrote back. I told her I wasn't ready to see them yet, that I needed more time, that if we were going to rebuild anything, it had to start with honesty, and honesty required acknowledging what had actually happened. I didn't hear back for 2 weeks. Then she replied, "Okay, we'll wait." That was all it said. And for the first time, I believed her. I didn't know if we'd ever have the kind of relationship I used to want, the kind where I could call them and not feel like I was walking into a negotiation, the kind where they saw me as more than a resource. But I knew one thing. I wasn't going to sacrifice my peace to find out. 6 months after I moved in, I was sitting on my back deck one evening watching the sunset when I realized something. I was happy, not in a loud, celebratory way, just in a quiet, steady way that felt like it might actually last. I had a house I loved, work that paid the bills, friends who showed up, space that was mine, and I'd stopped waiting for permission to enjoy it. My parents had tried to take this from me, not because they needed it, but because they were used to me giving them whatever they asked for. And when I finally said no, when I finally drew a line and held it, they'd left. Not because I'd been cruel, but because I'd stopped being useful. That hurt. But it also clarified everything. Because love isn't supposed to feel like obligation. It's not supposed to require you to give up the things you've worked for just to prove you care. Real love respects boundaries. It asks before taking. It apologizes when it crosses a line. And if someone can't do that, then maybe the healthiest thing you can do is let them walk away. I thought about my parents sometimes. I wondered if they were okay, if they'd figured things out, if they missed me the way I sometimes missed the version of them I used to believe in, but I didn't reach out. Because I'd learned something important. You can love people and still protect yourself from them. You can want a relationship and still refuse to accept one that hurts. And you can walk away from family and still be a good person. That's the part no one tells you when you're growing up. That sometimes the strongest thing you can do isn't forgiving someone who hurt you, it's refusing to let them do it again. Here's what I learned from all of this. Your parents don't get to take what you've built just because they raised you. They don't get to ignore your boundaries just because they're family. And you don't owe them access to your life if they've spent years treating it like a resource instead of respecting it as your own. Some people will call that selfish. Some people will say you should have tried harder, forgiven faster, given more chances. But those people aren't the ones who had to protect what they built from the people who were supposed to protect them. So, if you're reading this or watching this or listening to this, and you've ever had to choose between keeping the peace and keeping yourself whole, I want you to know something. You're allowed to choose yourself. You're allowed to say no. And you're allowed to build a life that doesn't include people who only show up when they need something from you. From my point of view, this story is a reminder that boundaries aren't walls, they're foundations. And sometimes the people closest to us need to learn that love doesn't mean unlimited access. It means mutual respect. And if they can't offer that, then the healthiest thing we can do is step back and build something they can't take away. So I'll ask you this. Have you ever had to protect something you built from people who thought they had a right to it? And if so, how did you find the strength to hold the line? If this story meant something to you, if it reminded you that your peace is worth protecting, I'd be grateful if you'd subscribe. There are more stories like this, stories about people who chose themselves, and I'd love to share them with you.